All right, welcome to task 3. We are focused on circles today, specifically the area and the circumference. So there's going to be a little bit of vocab here at the beginning, so just bear with me and copy some stuff down. But essentially, calculating the circumference and the area, we're going to need to know this vocab. So circumference is essentially the total distance around a circle. So it's as if I were walking around a circle, what's my distance I would make as I make that complete circle. Whereas area is essentially the space inside a circle, or really any object. So my space inside is area, my distance outside is circumference. And this changes, how I solve things and, of course, how the units are given. So circumference is given in linear units. We've been using inches or centimeters or meters, whereas area is given in squared units, right? Because we're multiplying more squared units. And so I have inches squared or centimeters squared or meters squared. Those would be my units for area. So circumference is length. Area is, of course, space inside, and that's why it's squared. We're going to use this thing pi quite a bit. It looks like 2 lines, a little squiggly mark on top. It essentially equals 3.14 if I were to round it. Pi, just for reference, is essentially a ratio of the circumference of a circle to the diameter of a circle. That's not really necessary information, but it is there just so that you understand what pi is. It is a known ratio used in all circles. And we use it to calculate circumference and area of a circle. So circumference is using, let me go talk about diameter and radius. Let's see, if I were to look at a circle, there's a center, right? Center. And if I were to measure the distance across, this would be called my diameter. Diameter is essentially my entire distance across. There's also something called the radius. If I were to take the radius, we call that r. Let me label it out here. My radius is r. My radius is essentially the distance to the center. So sometimes we'll use diameter for solving. Sometimes we'll be given the radius for solving. So radius is just my distance from here to here. Diameter is my distance all the way across. Obviously, diameter is essentially double the length of my radius. Okay. That should be something that maybe you've seen before. Hopefully you've seen before. The new things might be more circumference and area. So circumference is essentially my diameter times pi. This whole distance across times pi. Sometimes we're not always given the diameter. Sometimes we're given the radius instead. I can solve for my circumference by just multiplying 2 times pi times my radius as well, because diameter is just 2r. Area is a little bit different because it's a little bit more squared, right? We have to have a square in there in order to figure out that space. So area only uses radius. The formula for area is pi r squared. And so these equations, and sometimes even this one, are what we're going to use to determine circumference and area. And we'll use them over and over and over again. So here we are given my radius. 15 is my radius. And so if I want to find circumference, I'm going to take 2 times pi times 15. Let's multiply this times ours. 2 times 15 is 30. So I got 30 pi. Sorry, that's an ugly pi. 30 pi. And if I were to solve 30 pi, there's a couple ways I can do this. There is a pi button up here, right up here. And so I could type in 30 and then click second and my pi button right there will give me this big long decimal, 94.247, and I could just round it. to 94.2. But I could also just type in 30 times 3.14, and that will essentially give me my same answer. Sometimes the rounding will be a little bit different depending on what the number is, but my circumference is 94.2 inches. 94.2 inches. Area, I'm still going to use my radius this time, right? My R is still 15, but this time I want area, so I'm going to do pi r squared. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 15 times 15. 15 times 15 is 225. And so if I were to take pi times 225, I would get 706.858. And I can go ahead and round it. Let's use 706.86 inches squared as my area. Let's do another couple examples. So let's flip over to the back side. Before I even start, I like having that equation right next to me, so I know circumference is 2 pi r, or my diameter times pi, and area is pi r squared. So let's figure out what we're given. This 7 inches is in fact my radius. And so if I were to figure out circumference, I'm going to take 2 pi times 7. I'm going to use this equation because I'm given my radius. And so 14 pi, right? 2 times 7 is 14. And so I'm going to take 14 times pi, and that'll give me 43.98. Now area is pi r squared. So area, I have pi times 7 squared. Well, 7 squared, 7 times 7 is 49. And so let's take 49 times pi, and that gives me 153.9. I'll round that up, 9.38. We'll make that 3 larger. So 153.94 inches squared. Looking at number 2. I'm given here 10 feet is my diameter. It's going across the whole circle, so that's my D. So I'm going to have circumference equals my diameter times pi. And so in my calculator, I'm going to have 10 times pi, which is 31.4. I'll round that up, 0.42. But then my area is pi r squared. And so I need to figure out what my r is. I need to figure out what my r is. If this is 10 feet, I want to know what only half of it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my diameter 10 and divide it by 2, which gets me 5. So 5 feet is my radius. And so my area is actually going to be pi times 5 squared, or in other words, 5 times 5 is 25. So my area is actually 25 pi. So 25 times pi is 78.53, but I'm going to round that up, so I'm going to have 78.54 feet squared. 78.54 feet squared. All right, and then the last example here, before I have you try these, do these couple on your own. I want to figure out the shaded region. So my total area is going to be my length times my width of everything inside. 21 times 25 which in this case, 21 times 25 is 525. And then I want to find area of my circle. Let's do circle. Area is my circle. Again, it gives me my diameter, but in area, I want my radius. So if this is 14 inches, my radius should equal half that. 14 divided by 2 is actually 7. So we're going to use 7 as my radius. So pi times 7 squared. Or in other words, pi times 49. Or 49 pi, really doesn't matter. 49 times pi is 153.94. And I want to know just the shaded region. So let's subtract total minus circle. 525 minus 153.94 is 371.06. And that's going to be inches squared. And that my shaded region. So then you're supposed to be doing these next 4. Try on your own for numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Area and circumference.